Hey, welcome. This is Steve Goodner, and today I just want to talk a little bit about assessments, demystifying them. I really thought about this. How can I share something that may not be somebody's primary area of excitement, like assessments, taking tests, things like that? But how can I really share the value? How can I share the excitement that I see in what can come out of assessments? And so I've tried to put this together today in a way that we're just going to have a conversation about what are assessments, what are they not. I think that's just as important. But why do I get excited about assessments in what I do? I do executive coaching, leadership coaching, coaching of salespeople, coaching of ministry leaders. I do masterminds in leadership, sales, and in ministry. I do a lot of things, but when it comes down to it, everything I do starts with assessments. And there's a reason for that. People are important. People's lives and their livelihood are some of the most important things that there are. So I want to be very honoring of people. I want to be very honoring of who they are, what they're trying to accomplish in life, and do it in a way that helps them and empowers them and equips them to really be able to move forward in a real strong way. When you get ready to make an important decision, what's one of the things that you do? My guess is part of your critical decision making process is to get the very best information that you can get that will help you to make that the best decision, right? Well, that's what assessments are about. One of the most important things in life, which is how do we become who we need to become and want to become. And that's my focus. And that's why I get excited about assessments. I love the science, sure. And I've been working in assessments for more than 40 years. Um, my dad was a psychologist. He had his own assessment company. So I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, so to speak. But what I get excited about is what assessments can do for people. So let's jump into this. And I've shared, my experience with you. Why does this matter right now? Why am I talking about this right now? Well, there are some consistencies over time that I've seen, and that is good data leads to better decision making, which leads to better outcomes. That hasn't changed. But things have changed in our world. So, for instance, what's changed? Well, things are moving a little fast right now, if you haven't noticed. I mean, I have. I mean, technology is just expanding and growing and advancing like crazy. And there's this growth process going on where there are two different channels of growth. There's human growth, which is what I'll be talking about today. But then there's technology growth. Well, technology growth is fast outpacing human growth. And the more that we focus on technology, the less we focus on human growth, our growth. And there's nothing wrong with technology. I use it. I use AI. I use a lot of different types of technology, but they're tools, and you need to balance the human side with the technology. And so that's a critical aspect. So that means we have to up our game when it comes to developing ourselves, developing the people around us. Maybe you're a leader of a team, whatever that happens to be. We have to be very thoughtful about how do we help grow ourselves and our people along with the way that technology is advancing, because that's when things work extremely well. And that's where a competitive advantage comes from, or higher levels of impact in whatever you're doing, whether it's leadership, sales, ministry, or just life. So we're also going to talk about the time, focus, energy, effort resources that are so precious to each of us. With everything that's going on in the world and in our lives today, we have to be very good stewards of those four resources. We need to spend them well every day. And the only way to do that is to continue to grow ourselves in a way that we can use those resources wisely every day. And I also want to just debunk the myths about what assessments are, what they're not. I'm going to talk about that. So let's jump into this. I will check the chat every once in a while. And the ticker at the bottom here has primarily been, I love to have conversations with people about the things that I do, the things that I know can help other people. My purpose, I boiled my purpose down to two words, and that is equip people. And the way that happens, the right way to do that, is we start with good assessments. But let's get into that and describe what that is. First, everything I do, as I say, starts with assessments. Now, where can you leverage assessments? Well, definitely in hiring. My dad had a way of saying things that I really appreciated. He had a CEO come to him one day, and I happened to be in the room at the time when this was happening. And the CEO asked my dad, he said, well, when we're hiring people, what's the advantage of using your assessment packages? Notice I use the word packages because I don't believe in single assessments. I think that's a road to a lot of problems. And I'll explain more about that later. But he looked at the CEO and said, okay, let me ask you a question. If you could know the same information about a person that you would learn if you worked with them for a year, but you could know that before you make a hiring decision, would that be an advantage to you? Well, of course, the CEO said yes. Well, that's what you can get out of a well-designed package of assessments that are appropriate for the situation. Now, it was funny. I got on. I'm on Reddit. I do have a subreddit like leadership that I'm on quite often, and I'm just trying to help people. There's a lot of people that are new leaders, young leaders, trying to figure out life, trying to figure out how to lead other people. They're good at what they do as an individual contributor, but now they're in leadership, and it's like, wait a minute, what's the deal with these people? Why won't they just do what they're supposed to do? So I was sharing that on one of those streams, one of those Reddits, and I had somebody come back at me and say, "Well, that's just ridiculous. You know, that's not true." And I say, "Well, all I can say is I've been doing it for 40 years. I've been doing it with thousands of people and hundreds of organizations, and it's worked out really well. So, hey, if it's not for you, that's fine. And hey, maybe this isn't for everybody, but for those of us who can see the advantage of looking inside, whether it's ourselves or somebody else, and getting a true picture of what's going on and, what's happening in our lives and what we bring to the table and where we want to grow and develop. If that's an advantage to you, then let's keep talking here. What else can we do? Well, obviously, I talked about growth and development, right? Then there's upskilling. Upskilling is so important. There are two critical competencies that are tied together, and that is capacity and competency. The more you can increase your capacity, the more you can become more competent. As you become more competent, you can create more capacity. So this is kind of a growth process. And, very much like a tree. A lot of times I'll talk about the tree of leadership, where it grows from the roots through the trunk and spreads out and grows and becomes this beautiful big tree that has huge impact on the environment around it. That's what we all can be. So upskilling is very important, especially in the world today. Team building. Assessments are fantastic for building strong, high-performing teams. And then what about organizational health and vitality? Um, as Patrick Lencioni, very famous author, says, organizational health trumps everything in business. And I totally agree with that. But how do you know where the unhealthy parts of your organization are if you don't assess that? If you don't figure out, where is some good actionable data that we can understand what's going on? And that's what assessments are. So let me move on now and talk about unleashing the power of assessments. Um, it literally is a pathway to enlightened decision making in a brighter future. And I talked about this before. I use the word assessments, plural, for a very specific reason. I'm sure all of you that are watching this have at some time been through some kind of an assessment, personality or strengths or something like that. There's nothing wrong with those as long as they are well validated, good assessments, right? The problem with using a single assessment, and again, I'll dive a little deeper into that here in a minute, but the problem is it's a very narrow view of what's going on. And if that's all you're focused on with an individual, whether you're hiring and I certainly highly recommend against single assessments for hiring, because literally the only legal cases I have seen won about using assessments and hiring has been when somebody used a single assessment and used it incorrectly, and they used it to make a decision about hiring. Now, I don't want to scare people away. Assessments are incredibly powerful, especially in the hiring process and the development process as well. But there's safety in numbers, okay? When you have a holistic look at the individual. And then there's always, in hiring, there's interviews, there's resumes, there's all kinds of other things that are a part of the hiring process. But you can literally, I have seen in the work that we do, we can just about double the national average for successful hires by using a well-curated package of assessments in pre-hire mode. Okay, I don't want to get too much into the science and all of that, but we're going to talk about what are assessments, what they're not, the return on investment of assessments. We're going to talk about cautions and best practices, the assessment advantage, and I'm going to share some different types of assessments, because what I want to share with you today is that if you work with a certified assessment professional like myself, who has been doing this a long time and got a lot of real life, real world business organizational experience, there's a real power to these assessments that can create launching pads to accelerate success and accelerate growth. And that's why I get excited about these. So let's jump into what assessments are. They're data-driven tools that measure strengths, blind spots, gaps, growth opportunities, okay? Notice none of that says judgment or labeling or anything like that. They are building blocks for transformation, not judgment, okay? And they're roadmaps that provide clarity and they accelerate development. Even in a pre-hire mode, the way I use pre-hire assessments, if and when the organization hires the individual, it is a fast track onboarding process, because we already know quite a bit about the individual that we can share with other people, that we can share with the hiring manager, with the team, with the organization. And so we can fast track the onboarding process, which reduces the runway for somebody to be fully productive. So now you can see why I get excited about that. Plus, the average tenure, if you look at national statistics, the average tenure for a new hire today is 2.4 years and 1.9 years for younger generations. We can double that with assessments. That's what we've seen when you use a good, curated, validated package of assessments. Well, think about this. How long does it take for a new hire to become truly effective and productive? Maybe a few months, maybe up to a year, depending on the role. Well, if they're leaving at 2 years, around 2 years, you're only getting about a year of full productivity, and maybe not even that if they're looking for another position or another opportunity. What if you can expand that though to 4 or 5 years where retention rates go up? Then you're starting to build a bench. You're starting to build a team that brings real value to the organization. And I'm going to talk about where we go with that, those roadmaps, because it isn't just about hiring. It's also about investing in people and developing them after you hire them. So why are assessments a growth multiplier? Number one, they accelerate learning. They less trial and error. Okay. They reduce wasted effort and turnover. They create clear success pathways for people. That's so important. Gallup says about 68% of employees never get any constructive feedback about their performance, about their jobs, about what they're doing. That's sad. And that's not good for anybody. So this is going to provide more clarity, more of a success pathway where expectations are clear and everybody's on the same page. And there is a lot of return on investment using assessments, whether it's for hiring, development, or just personal growth. I am a life coach as well. I work with people in their personal lives and helping them live their best life. So now let's get into what assessments are not, because I think this is really important. They're not pass-fail tests. That's so important. None of us like tests. Well, maybe some people do. I never really liked tests. Most people have a bit of a test phobia. That's not what assessments are. I want you to think of assessments. And I have this happen a lot. People will say, how do you know this about me? This is like magic. And I kind of laugh. I love that when they say that. But the reality is, what I say to them is, no, it's not magic. It's you telling yourself about you. Because most assessments, unless they're 360s, most assessments are the individual taking the assessment, telling themselves about themselves. And that's important because it creates this dynamic of a truthful reflection. It allows you to go deeper and better understand, where am I really today and what's really going on for me today. So let's look a little deeper here at what assessments are not. Let's debunk some of the myths, okay? They're not pass-fail. We've talked about that. They're about providing clarity and growth pathways. Assessments do not put people in a box. People think, oh my gosh, if I take these assessments, then they're going to put me in a box. No, the truth is they reveal patterns, not labels. We don't label people, and they open opportunities for growth. Here's another myth. Any free online assessment is good enough. Well, you get what you pay for, okay? And honestly, what I'm very careful about is looking at the predictive validity of any assessment that I use. What is that? It's very simple. Predictive validity is, does the assessment measure what it says it's going to measure? And do those measures actually happen in real life? When you get good predictive validity on an assessment, then you've got something you can hang your hat on, so to speak. So quality assessments are validated, they're reliable, they're administered by certified professionals like myself. Um, Here's another myth. One assessment tells you everything. Real insight comes from multidimensional assessments, which are interpreted in context. Now, again, I don't want to go too deep into the science here, but I hope you're understanding what I'm trying to say, which is bottom line, good assessments are packages of assessments that take a holistic look at an individual and provide true insight, which then helps you make your best decisions, whether you're hiring or whether you're developing yourself or other people. And it also starts to create, I've seen this in organizations that I've worked with, it creates an internal language that they start using with each other. And it really becomes very productive and very effective. So let's move on and talk about, I want to talk about the ROI of assessments. What is the return on investment? And so I think it's important here to share. For about the same price as one monthly car payment, I'm talking about what I know about assessments and what I offer to people. For about what you pay in one monthly car payment, you can get a package of assessments well designed for what you're trying to accomplish, and that will provide information, it will provide insight, it will provide a path forward that can help you for years to come. And we think about the things that we invest in our lives, and people, to me, people are the most important thing in life. Now, maybe that's not the same for everybody, but that's what it is for me. The way that I look at this is very simple. Why would you not invest a little bit in yourself or in other people to really make a huge impact and a big difference and really help them accelerate or help you accelerate your success in life, your satisfaction in life, and to grow in new and different ways that you want to grow? So what's the ROI? Well, I'll give you first different things that assessments will provide. Clarity is one big one. In a world of uncertainty, clarity is gold, right? So clarity of strengths, blind spots, gaps, growth opportunities, accelerated growth and development, definitely, because you're focused on the right things. Improved alignment to your goals. That's another part of the process that I think is so important. And better decision making. I think we would all want that, right? Whether we're developing ourselves, looking for our own growth pathway, or our people, or we're hiring new people, or whatever it happens to be, it's important to look at getting our very best decisions, right? So let me give you now some numbers. This came out of Psychology Today by Katie Cook, PhD. Emotional intelligence training can yield a whopping 1,484% return on investment for organizations. So this is a well-documented publication, Psychology Today, right? This was quite the study. But where does this start? This emotional intelligence training has got to start with good assessments. If you don't have good data to focus in on where people need to grow and develop skills, and I'm all about emotional intelligence. That's a huge part of what we do. I mean, the name of our organization is EQFIT, and EQ is emotional quotient, or the measure of emotional intelligence. But where in the world can you get a 1,484% return on investment, right? You're not going to get in the stock market. You're not going to get in a lot of other places. This is why I get so excited about what I do, and why I get so passionate about everything starts with assessments, because that is that is like opening the door to possibilities and where you can go. So many people today are in reactive mode. They're in firefighting mindset all the time, and they're not growing, they're not developing, they're not moving forward. And the sad part about that is they could if they wanted to. And what I want to see is I want to see people excel. I want to see them grow. I want to see them become who they want to become. So many people today, for whatever reasons, have just kind of resigned themselves to, I guess this is the way it has to be. I guess it'll always be this way. And that is self-talk that comes out of a lack of growth and skill development. And emotional intelligence skills are the skill set that will change that dynamic. But it's got to start with assessments. So let's talk a little bit about assessment cautions, okay? Number one, you get what you pay for. So I want to share this. When I do an assessment package for someone, let's say it's a development package, and it can run, anywhere from several $100s, $600, $700, $800 up to maybe $1,200 or something like that. So about 1 month of a car payment, right? But that information can then be multiplied, and the outcome of that, the return on that investment, will be huge, because you have good data to make good decisions, to move forward in a very clear direction and a very clear pathway to achieve the things you want to achieve. You can't fix what you can't see. That's what assessments are. When we do assessments for people, I use this metaphor of basically what we're doing is creating together. You're taking the assessment, I'm doing the interpretation. We're creating a mirror for you to look in to get a true picture of your current reality. So you know where you are, and you know what you need to do to move forward. And it gives people hope, and it gives people this feeling of, wow, I can really, really focus in on this and this. And I think one of the myths that's out there is that, I just have to live with my circumstances. I can't change much. Let's just talk about the 1% rule and compounding, right? If you just work on one little thing, these small little steps, these things you can do day in and day out, may not seem like much, but there is a compounding effect to those, that through a year's period of time, you could be 37 times better at something through the compounding equation. And that goes for developing yourself and others as well. What would it look like if you were 37 times better at the end of a year, right? That gives me hope for myself. Another, caution, again, I'll say it, don't use one assessment only. Don't make decisions on one assessment. I know there are all kinds of great organizations out there with huge marketing budgets selling everybody on their strengths assessment. And I'm not knocking anybody. Those are good assessments, okay? Don't get me wrong, but they're very limited in what they can show you. And here's what I have found, and I've worked with people that have taken a strengths assessment, and then they're very frustrated, they're very upset. Why? Because, well, they're focused on their strengths and all of that, and it isn't working for them, and they still feel stuck. And they can't figure out why, because they've only been given one tool. Well, everything is not a nails, and if your only tool is a hammer, you look at everything as a nail. That's just not a good way to approach things, when there is so much more that you can learn through a what I call a multidimensional assessment process. And the other thing I want to caution people about is using an assessment beyond its capability. I've seen this where people say, well, we use this DISC assessment, and hey, if you come to our team as a leader, if you don't have a high D on the DISC assessment, you can't be a leader. We're not going to bring you in. And I have turned away clients that have that kind of an attitude. I have not done business with them because they're stuck in this mindset of you have to, and that's labeling and putting people in a box. And I don't believe in that. Are there people that are more naturally gifted to be leaders? To some degree, yes. But the reality is leaders are made as much as they are genetic. It's through different skills and through learning emotional intelligence and all of that. So there's some cautions. What about best practices? The right assessments for the right purpose, right? So for instance, in hiring, maybe it's not the same package for every single different role. Think about that. If you're hiring at the executive level versus an entry level, does it make sense that you'd use the same package of assessments? No, that doesn't make sense. You would change some. Some of those might be the same, but there would definitely be a change in some of those assessments that are role appropriate. Same thing as far as developing goes. If you're entry-level individual or an emerging leader, maybe you're not getting the exact same package of assessments that an executive who's been seasoned leader for a couple of decades that we look there at. So the right assessment for the right purpose, engage an assessment professional like myself who can provide guidance and real world experience. Again, I'm not going to denigrate anybody else, but I see, there's some groups of psychologists out there doing assessments. That's great, right? There's other people that are offering, this assessment or that assessment, and they've done a little bit of this or that. Vet your assessment professional, okay? Are they certified in multi different kinds of assessments? Not just personality, not just strengths, but, emotional intelligence, habit formation and transformation, different, maybe sales specific assessments. If you're looking at sales development or sales enablement, leadership specific assessments, cognitive assessments, higher thinking skills assessments. There are so many different types of assessments that are so critical here. And look at assessments as a launching pad. They're not an end all be all. You give assessments, you give the feedback, and then you put it on the shelf. Well, what good is that? They're a launching pad. So let's talk about how can you create an advantage with assessments? Well, this is a proven approach to getting a true advantage. Now, whether you're developing yourself personally or professionally, or you're a leader that's hiring, or you're a leader that's leading a team, or whatever that happens to be, maybe it's team assessments, or maybe it's organizational surveys and assessments. Start with a multidimensional assessment approach. Make sure that you work with a certified assessment professional who can put all of this into the right context and connect all the dots. It's the correlation of the different data points in assessments that's so critical. It isn't, oh, here's this report and here's that report. What I provide to people when I do assessments is not a report. It's a launching pad. It is a deep conversation about what are these assessments telling you, what would you like to do with that information, and what is the best path forward. That also comes back to my 40 plus years of being, in business and working with organizations and organizational development. That is a winning combination. So it turns insight into action and then it turns that action into transformation. And I like to say transformation and not change. Change is you go back and forth with change, right? I'm talking caterpillar to butterfly kinds of things. Um, the time factor involved here, I know a lot of people, one of the myths is, oh, a package of assessments, it's going to be all day long. And oh my gosh, no. I mean, I can give a package of assessments to people. They can get it done in an hour or two, and they get the insight that's going to help them for years from that 1 or 2 hours of investment in taking those assessments. Predictive validity is so critical. We've talked about that. And here's the key. It's got to be actionable data. If it isn't actionable, what good is it? If you can't do something with what you get out of these assessments, then don't do it in the first place. But I don't use anything that doesn't provide actionable data. Now, let me show you kind of some of what's possible when we're talking about assessments. Simplified. Okay, if we're just going to simplify all this, a good multidimensional assessment package will provide insight that can lead to action, that can lead to transformation. Now, I want to get into specific assessments, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. I don't want to bore people with this stuff. But when I talk multidimensional assessments, I want you to understand what I mean by that. So it starts with personality, behavior, and motivators. I use a DISC assessment that also has motivators or mindsets, driving forces. Trimetrics from TTI Success Insights is one I found to be very useful, that provides a lot of really good information around assessments and around the individual, I should say. Personality is not a primary predictor of success. I want to make sure I state that, because so many organizations use a personality assessment and that's it. That's all they use, and they think that's what we need. Now, what it does do, it'll help you understand work styles, communication style, preferences, which are very helpful. It helps to understand how to communicate with different people, if they're high D's or high I's, high S, high C, whatever. That's all great. But in itself, personality assessments are not a primary predictor of success. Understanding more about what motivates a person, what energizes and drives their decisions, that's another element in the assessment process that adds another layer. So we're starting to get that multidimensional approach here. The Trimetrics, I like using it because it shows how you think, why you act the way you do, and what you do. So it really provides some detailed information around that. But as I said, that's kind of just the start of where we're talking about multidimensional assessments. The next area is emotional intelligence, which is huge. Emotional intelligence is 2 to 4 times more predictive of success than IQ is. So these are just some different emotional intelligence assessments that I utilize. There's the SAY assessment, or the 6 seconds emotional intelligence assessment from 6 seconds, the largest emotional intelligence community in the world. Then they have a SAY LTC. What's the LTC stand for? Leading through change. That is the primary emotional intelligence assessment that I use alongside of the Life Thrive emotional intelligence assessment. Why the SAY LTC? It has a measure of change readiness. How ready is someone to embrace change, to be adaptive, innovative, and move forward? That's a critical measure. I work closely with the individual who created that assessment, that SAY LTC, when she was first getting ready to launch it. And it was a great way to understand where this was going and what it was going to be able to do with people, and for people, to be honest about it. The Life Thrive Emotional Intelligence Assessment is based on the 5 competency model: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. The Trust Style Inventory, another good friend of mine, created the Trust Style Inventory based on emotional intelligence measures. And it really is the way that somebody builds trust with other people. Another amazing assessment. And then we even have a spiritual emotional intelligence assessment because our spiritual self is a big part of who we are. I think you can start to see how some of these are really impactful, but you wouldn't use all of them with an assessment package, right? You would use the appropriate ones with an assessment package. So you use something from the personality, behaviors, motivators, mindsets. You use something from the emotional intelligence. And then this assessment, and this is just a single assessment, but this habit story assessment, the concept of it and the utilization of it has been around for more than 30 years. But just in the last few years, it has been developed into a specific assessment called the habit story assessment. Why is this so important? And frankly, it's probably one of the most impactful and useful assessments I have ever used. And I've used over 200 different assessments over the last 40 years. So I have a pretty good understanding of psychometric tools and how they're applied. The habit story assessment is amazing because it measures productive and counterproductive habits on the same scale. Why is that important? Because counterproductive habits, which are very difficult for us to see just by reflection and observation and self-awareness, they reduce our ability for our productive habits to shine. And so when we work with individuals and coach them around this assessment, we specifically look at reducing the counterproductives first. But that's not the only measure you get. You also get response patterns, how somebody responds, and you get their emotional state. All of those come together to provide a really robust look at the habit story of an individual. Here's some counterproductive habits that you may have, and I have for that matter: deny, dismiss, sabotage, blame shift. So deny is kind of like you deny yourself things that, the opposite side of that, the productive, is enjoy. So are you denying yourself things that would recharge your batteries if you had more enjoyment in your life? Blame shift is a big one, right? We see that a lot, and that's a counterproductive habit that can really create some problems. Sabotage, there's another counterproductive habit that can be a real challenge for people to overcome. So this assessment is a part of just about every assessment package that I use because there's nothing else that measures what this measures. And our habits, 40 to 90% of our daily actions and decisions are driven by our habits, which means very little thought or consideration. So this is a critical measure. That is another layer in the multidimensional assessment approach. Then we may have specific types of assessments, right? I do a lot of work with salespeople. So the EQFIT sales profile from 6 Seconds, actually, I created that. Initially, it was called the EQFIT sales profile. And I turned that over to 6 Seconds as my focus shifted in other directions. And they're keeping that up. And it's a great assessment to measure how salespeople are showing up to influence buyers. And it's built in the competencies of emotional intelligence. And it's so critical. Why is this important? Because 70 to 95% of buying decisions are based on emotional drivers. And I know people say that, oh, that can't be right. Well, okay, then you can argue with the Harvard Business School and Forbes and Gallup and 6 Seconds and all of those people who have done the research and the studies who say, yeah, 70 to 95% of buying decisions are based on emotional drivers. And when I work with salespeople, and I've got a sales mastermind that's forming right now that will start in a couple of weeks here. Bottom line, if you don't address that part of the sales process, you're missing 70, 95% of the sales opportunity. And then TTI, Success Insights, has a sales coaching assessment that I absolutely love. It's very detailed. It's very good, based more on personality than on emotional intelligence. But when you put those together, you get a really nice view. What about other specialty assessments? Well, here's some critical ones from LifeThrive. Coachability, how coachable is the person? Trustworthiness index, how trustworthy is the individual? Response to conflict, how does someone respond to conflict? These are specialty assessments, but so important in given situations. And then from 6 Seconds, I've got this entire toolkit called Vital Signs. Leadership 360s, team vital signs, organizational vital signs. So think of the team and organizational as climate surveys for a team or an organization, but with actionable data. Most climate surveys that I've seen, big old thick binders, right? But what they don't give you is what to do about your engagement levels, what to do about different things that are going on. Oh, they'll give you a turn to Appendix A to talk about what you do. And I got so tickled when one of my clients showed me their most recent climate survey from a very well-known organization. And in there, it talked about they always look for the employee engagement level first. And, his was pretty low. It was in I want to say the low 30% range. Excuse me. And he showed that to me, and it says, see Appendix A for solutions. Awesome. So we turned to Appendix A for solutions. And it says in there, and I kid you not, it says in there, you need to work on improving your employee engagement levels. That was it. Awesome, right? So that's not actionable data. That doesn't help a lot. It gives you information, but actionable data tells you what to do with it. So all of these are so important. Now, let me kind of start to bring this together. When we approach what we do for people, we have a 4-step process: assess, equip, align, succeed. Succeed is really an outcome, right? But assess first, then equip people through whatever process that is, whether it's coaching or a mastermind. Give people the tools, the learning, whatever they need to be able to move forward. Then align it, connect people, purpose, and performance together so that it's all aligned for the goals that we want to achieve. And then you get the success, and you can get sustainable success that way. And you can see what we call the EQFIT mindset, where clarity, character, confidence, and competency converge. It's a lot of C's, right? So let me kind of close this out today just with a couple of thoughts. And again, I would love to have a conversation with you about anything that I've talked about today. And those conversations don't cost anything. So feel free to reach out. You're seeing below how to get in touch with me. Those conversations can be life-changing, and they can change the trajectory of teams and organizations. They can change the trajectory of a life. And that's really where this all comes down to. It comes down to changing lives one life at a time. And I believe very firmly in that process. Now, how can we help along those lines? Obviously, the assessment packages is the place to start. And even if that's all you do, is decide I'm going to invest in an assessment package for this reason, this purpose. What you're doing is a small investment for a very large return. And maybe you don't go any further, but maybe decide, wait a minute, maybe I want to join one of Steve's masterminds. And I've got one for leadership, one for sales, and one for ministry or ministry leaders. Or maybe I want coaching, one-on-one coaching or group coaching, whatever it happens to be. Maybe I want to bring my team together in a coaching environment where these assessments can give us the insight, the direction, the clarity we need to make our best decisions to move forward and reach our highest level of operating success. Whatever it happens to be, it all starts with a conversation. So I invite you to have that conversation with me, and I appreciate you being here today. And for those of you watching in the future,